Hi, I'm Kayla, and welcome to my channel where we talk all about startup and specifically project management in the startup space. Today's topic is going to be about interviewing. And I'm not going to talk about questions that you should be prepared to have asked of you. I've already done a video on that, and I'll link that up below. Today's video is around what you should be prepared to ask of your interviewer. And these are questions that are specifically geared toward startup sort of environments, maybe small business too. You don't have to be going for a project management position to ask these questions. I think these questions will give you a lot of really helpful information for any position, really, to evaluate the company, the person that you're interviewing with, figure out if this is going to be a good fit for you, because this is not a one-way street, it's a two-way street, and you get to interview your interviewer just as they get to interview you. So don't ever feel like you're totally at the mercy of them. There's plenty of opportunities out there. And the reason I wanted to do this video in the first place is because there's a lot of jobs out there right now, and I know there's a lot of interviews happening. So that's really exciting. And specifically for people who are kind of new to startup or new to the workplace in general, it's just important to remember that we can and should ask questions like this. Now, I'll preface this by saying these are not like your run-of-the-mill interview questions that you should already be asking. So we know that you should already be asking questions around the product or service because you've done some research on it, right? So you have some questions about that. You should be asking questions like, what's a day in the life look like? And who am I going to report to? And all of that good stuff. So that's not what these questions are. These questions are really, they're questions that I like to ask to give me information about this company, about who I'm interviewing with, about who I'm going to be reporting to and working with, to figure out if this is going to be a healthy and good fit for both of us. Before I get started, let's talk also briefly about red flags. It's important to watch for red flags. These questions that I'm going to give you will help reveal red flags, but in case you're not familiar with what that might look like, it's going to be the same type of thing that your mom taught you about before you started dating, or hopefully someone taught you about before you started dating, right? So like if their actions don't line up with their words, or like if they're over promising you something or love bombing you in the beginning, saying stuff like, oh yeah, we're totally cool if you bring your kid to work every day. No one should love you that much the second that they meet you, all right? Something's up if they're saying that. Maybe they're super desperate. What else? Like unrealistic expectations, which that can be sort of hard to pin down in a startup situation, because we know everyone wears all the hats and there's that kind of a thing going on. But ask a lot of questions, get as much as you can in writing, and you can figure that one out. So anyway, first things first, remember to watch for these red flags. All right, so I have 6 questions. I was going to do 5, but I couldn't help myself. So I have 6 questions. These are my favorite things to ask. All right, so question number 1, and this is really important for B2B companies. So I like to ask, how many clients are you currently supporting? How do you measure client satisfaction? Anything around that client space. So I can really understand, A, do you actually have paying customers? And B, do they find value in your service? Like, are you providing good support? What does your customer support program look like in general? Because we know that is such a huge piece to being a successful business. And so many times I've seen technology companies that's just sort of like an afterthought. They're building the thing without really thinking about the customer. We know with like all of this push that's happening right now with client success and client experience and even product management, that's really shifting. So you shouldn't see as many companies that don't have client support in mind. But ask that question, really figure out what does that whole space look like, specifically if you're going to be in any sort of a position that works with clients, which a lot of times project management works very closely with client support teams. So you'll want to ask that. The second question I like to ask, especially for project management positions, is how is your work currently being organized? You have no idea how many times I've asked that question of startups, like early startups, and they're like, oh, well, it's not. We're just sort of winging it. That is potentially an issue, right? Like, especially if you are supposed to be coming in as the one to save all of that, to fix all of that, to organize all of that. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, but there is something wrong with it if you're supposed to be that person and you don't have support, or you're supposed to be that person in addition to like wearing 5 other hats. It's unrealistic, okay? So you really want to understand, how's work being organized? What are the expectations with this position? How am I going to be supported in these efforts? That one you'll really want to get some clarity with, and make sure that you get some good answers. Okay, question number 3 is around culture. So we know culture is really sort of like a buzzword right now. Culture is really important. Culture means different things to different people, okay? And it's really important to remember that. It's also important to remember that words can sound really good. They can look really good on a piece of paper, but there's a lot more to culture than words. And so really the only way to figure that out is to be in the experience of what the culture is, but you can ask some questions to reveal what that means. So asking, what does a good culture fit mean to you? What does that mean? Just ask them that instead of asking, about words or things like that. What does a good culture fit mean? Talk to other people that work there if you can. If you interview with several different folks that work there, it's, I think, great practice to ask them, like, what does your work-life balance look like? Or, what do you enjoy most about working here? Or what's most frustrating? Ask them some questions about that so you can get them talking about those things, and you can start to understand what culture means to this organization. You'll also get some insight into turnover with that one if you ask some good questions. And I gotta say, if you see any sort of a mass exodus of employees, that is a huge red flag. Personally, I would walk, just because of the experiences that I've had in the past. Any sort of like high turnover situation is cause to be concerned. Okay, question number 4, this is a good one. If the startup has recently acquired a lot of funding and they're doing a lot of hiring, which happens, that has to happen, right? When you get a lot of money and you need to build a thing and you need to build it by a certain time frame, you need to have people to help you build it. So I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but what I like to understand is, how do you know which positions to hire? So who thought that through? How did you figure that out? Like, what's the strategy behind who it is that you're hiring? Because what I've seen is, this is just from firsthand experience, what I've seen is sometimes you get a lot of funding and you get excited and you go out and you hire a bunch of positions, but you haven't perhaps put the forethought into it that you needed to, and you realize you're missing some key pieces here, and then you don't have the money to hire those pieces, and you're sort of in a bind. So trying to understand what that strategy is behind the hiring is really important and revealing in how this company works. Okay, question number 5, and this is around transparency, because a lot of companies will say that they're transparent. Again, that means different things to different people. I always like to know with the startup what I'm getting into, so I like to ask, are you building this to sell, or are you building this for cash flow? Like, what's the plan here? And a good transparent company will give you an honest answer, and you'll be able to tell if it's honest because they won't ramble on and on and on about things. They'll either tell you, yeah, we're building it to sell, or we're doing this other thing. If they just start talking and talking and talking and talking, and you didn't really get an answer by the end of it, then that's a red flag. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with building it to sell or anything otherwise. You just want to know, and that's a great question to ask to see what that transparency level is. Okay, and then question number 6, this is around the CEO. I think the CEO can sometimes provide, actually the CEO does, in my opinion, provide the most information about whether or not this place is going to be a good fit for you. Depending on what position you're interviewing for and the size of this company, you may or may not have interface with the CEO at the time of your interview, but any sort of information you can get about that person, if there's videos online, watch them. You want to see what this person is like. Is this person inspiring? Do you feel like they're a good leader? Are they engaged? Like, what are they, what's their involvement in the day-to-day? Ask those questions of your interviewer and really try to get to know who this CEO is, what they stand for, how involved they are, because I gotta tell you, it's a huge red flag when you have a disengaged CEO or a CEO that doesn't want to have anything to do with the company anymore, especially if you're looking at a startup or a small business. That person should be the figurehead, the one that's really holding it all together, and they should be inspiring to you and to others. So get some information about that CEO and see what you can figure out there. All right, those are my 6 questions. Go out there, interview, good luck. Let me know how it goes.